We are live. Hello, hello, and welcome. This is Twisted Tales Studio, the horror agnostic channel where we love horror in all media formats, gaming, writing, you name it. And today I am simulcasting with the lovely Sephera. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing good. It's a snowy day here in Canada yet again.
Yeah, and some kind of crazy truck actions happening too. I saw in the news.
Oh
The
yeah, yeah.
truckers
The
are blocking the, I don't know if we want people to know exactly where we are, but there's a lot of truck action in Ontario.
I mentioned I'm in like general Ontario quite a
Okay.
bit. I'm not sure where the truckers are at right now, though.
They're going across the 401 from Hamilton to Ottawa.
Oh, okay. So it's safe to say that the highways are probably screwed.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of people out on them, and the police are losing their minds, and
Oh, I bet. I
and
bet.
so it's quite an exciting day after just after an ice storm for a trucker.
Convoy
What it's a
protest.
convoy of, yeah, protest, I guess is the word. I'm not really sure what the word is. So I'm just gonna take a second here to peek at my channel to make sure I'm even showing up.
Okay.
Hey, there we are. Look,
Yay! There we
it
are.
works.
It
Technology works.
Yeah, it's always a fun time trying to get these simulcasts all organized. Like the first couple of times I did it, we literally spent like an hour just trying to get my audio to work. So,
Oh boy,
yeah.
it's always exciting. Sorry, I'm not being distracted. I just am making sure. Okay, I'll just put that down.
No
Put it
worries at
away.
all.
I turned
Okay.
my phone off. Yeah, it's technology, but apparently it's working now unless no one can hear us. But I think I my is my needle moving? Is my needle? Yes, my needle is moving for my microphone and
Yay! Yeah, it's all
yay.
moving on my end too, so everyone should be able to hear us, which is what we want. Yay!
Yay.
Cool. So, why don't we stop talking about real life horror things and start talking about horror of the fictional variety?
Diving in. Let's
Yeah,
go.
which is what we specialize in here. So yes, you are a writer. How did you get started writing? Were you younger? Were you a kid, or did you get into it a bit later?
Um, One of those precocious kids. I started writing when I was really, really little. But of course, back in those days, we didn't have like 9,000 TV stations and streaming and movies and all that. There was not much to do. So you basically read and wrote, read and write it. We write it. So I seem to recall, I think, my first thing I wrote was because I was a pretty morbid kid. I like squirrels. I've always liked squirrels. I have the Scrat Ice Age game, and so I would see all these squirrels squished by the side of the road because
Oh,
they run out and they get hit
yeah,
by cars.
yeah.
And that I'd always cry when I'd see them, and driving in the car or walking down the street, whatever. So my first poem was about a squirrel with a crushed in skull. So just poor little squirrel. I still have it somewhere, bleeding from its eyes or whatever. So I think I was morbid as I think most kids were writing about things not quite so. So I'd say I started writing early and had the dark thoughts pretty early. you know?
Yeah, I know for myself, like I was also the type of kid who was watching all of like the really dark, like kids oriented shows, like all those ghost hunting shows and stuff.
Oh, Scooby Doo is my fave.
Oh yeah, Scooby Doo. There was all sorts of stuff like Casper.
Oh
Like,
yeah, Casper and in my day, we had like Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello, and so there's Abbott and Costello, a couple of horror movies with them. Would get up early Sunday morning and watch the Abbott and Costello show, and they'd show an Abbott and Costello movie every week. And sometimes I'd follow it with a Shirley Temple or a Three Stooges or whatever. So,
mhm.
and then we also growing up, we had movie the 4:30 movie. I would get home from school around 4:30, and then if I didn't have to go off to some kind of after school class, it was usually monster movies like Godzilla or something creepy or whatever. So, um, yeah.
Yeah.
Even though we had two channels, sometimes they were good.
Yeah, you got a lot of mileage out of those two channels.
Yep, yep.
Did you draw any inspiration from like reading? Like, what sorts of books do you like to read in your spare time?
Well, back in the day, like when I was little, I was definitely influenced by original fairy tales. My parents would read them to me, and we had books of the original fairy tales, which usually involves hacking off body parts or, people getting beheaded or tarred or, stuck in a barrel full of nails and, all these horrific things, not like what Disney does or, they're the darkest of the darknesses. And so definitely one of my favorite stories when I was well, a couple of them. One was The Goose Girl and one was called One Eyes, Two Eyes, and Three Eyes. And they both were just dark. Like The Goose Girl, like she had a pet horse, but the queen was jealous of her horse, so the queen like killed the horse and hung its head up in the
Jeez.
hallway. And the goose girl would walk by every day with her geese and talk, Falada, Falada, and the horse's name was Falada. I still remember that.
Hmm.
And that should ask it advice, and this horse head would talk to her. Yeah, so I'm growing up. I'm not even one yet hearing these stories, so kind of stuck in the head. Then summers in Maine certainly are an inspiration. My mother grew up in Maine, so would go to Maine every summer I went for about 15 or 16 years. And once I became an adult, I just did my own thing. So when I was a teenager, Stephen King was invented. And
It kind of became a thing.
yeah, because before he came along, um, there wasn't a genre called horror, right? So you'd go to I knew I had this dark thing, so I'd read a lot of mystery and crime, but I was always kind of looking for these other books. But and I grew up in London, Ontario, so I'd go into the library, and actually they let me use the adult library even when I was really little because I'd read all the books in the children's library. So it's like I got nothing to read, so they let me, as a little kid, go into the adult library. So they'd have these like little stickers on the books, like a heart for romance or a flashlight or all that stuff. So I'd always look for like the little skull or whatever, but there was no horror yet. So I was usually mystery or detective or something like that. So sometimes it'd just be something boring, like I would think it's boring, or sometimes it'd be,
Hmm.
some woman trapped in some mansion by her evil uncle and she's like going through the mansion. There's a lot of mansion stories,
It was like a
gothic things,
whole
right?
subgenre in itself. Yeah, like
Yeah,
gothic
yeah.
mysteries or something like that.
Yeah, and then like around that time, in my age, VC Andrews started The Flowers in the Attic. Anyway, so then Stephen King kind of popped up on the scene. I was about 14 when Carrie came out. So I read that, and at the time I didn't care for it that much because the movie and the book were so different.
Hmm.
And in my mind, because I was a chunky little kid and so was the original Carrie, I really felt the movie was miscast because who the hell's going to be, freaking out at Sissy Spacek? She's a beautiful, skinny woman. The kid in the
Yeah.
book is, a chunky little brunette, and pimply and all that. So that was my first time having a kind of like, what? You know, why did they adapt this book so poorly? But The Shining came out, and that was the big aha for me was The Shining came out, and I got it, my little book, and I went to my room to read it, and I was so terrified I couldn't stop reading it. My parents would come and knock on the door, go out and play. And I say, nope, nope, not going anywhere till I finish this book because I gotta know what happens because those things are loose,
Yep.
because in the original book there's like hedge animals were what scared me the most because it move when you're not looking, but they didn't make it into the first movie.
Yeah. They
And
made it into the second movie though, the like made for
yeah,
TV one that they did.
yeah,
Yeah.
with Steve Weber, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so it took me 2 days and I finished that book. So when I finished, I just closed up that book and I was like, when I grow up, I want to be a horror writer so I can scare the hell out of other people like I was scared for these 2 days. So I love Stephen King and he's my gateway drug. And at the time, I voraciously read everything. And I have to say, once I had kids, I didn't read a book a day anymore,
Oh my
and I
God.
haven't since. So I went from being super voracious reader to not as voracious at all, not even close. But I would. But you were asking. The latest book I did read was a Stephen King book,
Oh
and I'm
my
so far
God.
behind. I'm so far behind. This is the one. This came out what 20 years ago, but it was really so during the pandemic. I finally sat down and read this book, and I'm really behind on all my Stephen Kings, and I really loved it. And the reason why I don't read as much as I want to is because I am a book editor. And so I'm usually reading someone else's book
Hmm.
and then to edit it. And then I'm writing my own books too. And then for the longest time as well, when I was first a published author, I couldn't read other people's books while I was writing my own. I would always feel like I start doing their narrative style and things like that. So um, that's a reason why I didn't read as widely as I wanted to. And it's the same now. I'm always working on a book, and I don't want to have other people's thoughts in my head. And, it's hard enough when I'm just editing other people's books, but then to have, a Stephen King story rattling in my brain, then I start writing like him. And, it's-
Yeah, for
but yeah.
sure. One of my chatters just commented because my last guest, who's also a writer and also an editor, was on here. It's amazing how many of us are drawn to that profession. We just want to surround ourselves with it.
Yeah, yeah. It's words. Got playing with the words.
Playing with the words, but yes, it does mean you probably read for pleasure a little bit less because you've been reading all day, every day.
Yeah, yeah. And then there was a few years there where I didn't have really good reading glasses, so it's hard to, and then I'm reading books on the computer to edit, so I don't want to be
Mm.
reading for fun on the computer. So yeah, so I've launched back into, well, I should say during the pandemic,
Hmm.
I've kind of changed who I am. You know, um, I how do I put it? When I was in university, I took creative. I was going to major in creative writing, but I just stayed in fine art studies. But I took, 4 years of screenwriting and a lot of filmmaking and stuff like that, as well as writing and poetry and plays and all those things. And so during the pandemic, because I've been a novelist for so long, I thought I'm going to return to my screenwriting roots and play around with that. So I've been really binge watching tons of shows, tons of movies over the last 2 years, and I've been working on several screenplays and TV pilots and stuff. So, and I've also been working on a book, of course. And then I also, when my kids were growing up, they, super loved video games and all that. And I would never let myself play because I knew once I started playing, I would never stop. And so um, about a year, shortly into the pandemic, my computer blew up. And it's like, oh man, and my one son is like, why don't you build yourself a computer, mom? You can do it. I'm like, no, I'm just going to buy one. No, you got lots of time, just do it. So I bought all the parts of computer and built it myself in 2 days. And I was terrified, but I did it. I did it. And so when I was
Wow.
ordering parts for the computer, I wanted to make a really good gaming computer because I was
Hmm.
going to learn how to game, and I wanted to do Oculus Rift and all that stuff, right? So
Hmm.
I wanted the VR, the ability to do VR on my computer. So I have all that going on. It's like, okay, I got a gaming computer. Now I gotta play a game. And then and when I bought the graphics card and stuff, I got a couple of free games with that. So I had Godfall and a couple of other games. So I got really hooked on Godfall, and I understand that. And then my son, one of my son's cousin Catnip here on Twitch, he gave me a pile of games. And so, yeah, so now on Twitch over the last year, it's embarrassing to be this old and not know how to do things. But I'm slowly getting my confidence to game live for all of you. I feel so naked, but, but I got my gaming computer, I got my channel, and I'm all good to go. Yeah, so so I'm now a screenwriter gamer as opposed to the novelist mom that I was before, right? So
Yeah.
I've kind of reinvented myself during the pandemic, and this is why I don't sit around crying all the time. Oh, the pandemic's so horrible. It's like I reinvented myself, and I know that's privilege and a luxury that most people don't have, but I was able to have it, and I'm very grateful. But yeah, so now I got to figure out how I'm selling these screenplays. You know?
Well, I mean, Ontario has a booming film industry, pretty, or at least it did before the pandemic. I guess it's
It
starting to
is, it
pick up
is,
again
it
now.
is.
So,
Oh, it's booming. There's so many. I do background work now and again, and
mhm.
I haven't worked. I think I worked like 4 times during the pandemic because I'm non-union. Otherwise, if I was union, I couldn't have a Twitch channel.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm not union. But I do know, like even this week on the Facebook group, it's like -20 out, and people are out there filming, doing their
Ugh.
thing in t-shirts. I read they had to all pretend they were in it like summertime, and this is the film business for those of you who want to get in the film business. They had here in Ontario, it's like -20, but it was like they had to all be in their t-shirts and shorts, -20, and we got snow like
Oh, yeah.
3 feet, 4 feet of snow,
Yeah, we
and these
recently had that
people.
big storm. Oh gosh.
And a couple people are like, they're just like, no, I'm out of here. I'm quitting. Like, are we allowed to quit? It's like, well, it's unsafe work conditions, you know.
I would completely understand. I am so miserable when I'm cold, and right
Oh
now it
yeah,
is like Canada in January, so like what do they expect the weather's gonna be like right now, really?
exactly, exactly.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, makes me I worked on in film like actually like on sets, but like I was always like in the back in the trailer
Inside,
like
yeah, you're in the little tent with the heater. Yeah,
yeah, in the little tent with the heater or in like the really ramshackle like warehouse with the raccoons making props.
oh right, yeah, you had to do all the propping, the propping,
Yeah.
prepping, propping.
Yeah, so it was slightly warmer. At least I wasn't outside. Oh,
Yeah. Oh, those people. I have been on miserable shoots. Like I did one just before Christmas, and it was supposed to be an interior day, and it was exterior. Like went into the nighttime, and it was so cold. Oh,
uh,
and we're all supposed to be fancy people. Like I had a nice warm coat, and I had a lot of layers on because I've done this long enough that I come prepared and have bought all the little thin shirts and all that
mhm.
stuff. So I know, but people who are new or whatever, they had to wear like really sexy dress with just a little stole. It's like, oh man, sucks to be you.
Under Armour is your
It's a
friend.
brutal work. Yeah, it's brutal work being a background person. So,
Yeah, for
but
sure.
that's why I don't really care that I'm not getting called.
Let them call you in the summer. It'll be nicer.
Yeah, yeah. Summer times are fun.
Hmm.
Sitting in
Exactly.
stadiums or whatever. But yeah.
Hmm. You mentioned earlier about going to university. I'd like to go back to that a little bit. So, was the plan always, I guess, to get into the screenwriting part of it, or were you focused on other parts of the arts?
Um, I I've always been kind of similar. Like back then, I played the violin, so I was in.
Yep.
So I took the violin lessons. I was in the quartet. I was in the chamber quartet. I was in the orchestra and stuff. I like to sing, so I was in the choir. I like to do theater. So I only did one play there because you had to be in the theater program to do plays, really. So I didn't really do much in the theater world, though I've
Hmm.
done shit tons in the theater world before university and after university. Um, and so it was like I went to York University, and so they have a fine arts studies program. So the first year you take fine arts studies, then you can in the second year you can choose a major if you want. So I was going to aim for creative writing. Um, and actually, I got to work with BP Nickel, who did Fraggle Rock. He created Fraggle Rock. Yeah,
Oh,
he was so cool, but he died like the next year. He died really young. He was like 35 or something.
yeah, I
But he was like
remember.
so cool and such an inspiration. Like he was such a kind. He was about the only teacher who really kind of like I felt connected to. And now the other ones were fine too. Like no one was an asshole in university, really. I don't think so. Um, but so there were a couple. So in first year, like there's creative writing class, and you'd read your stuff to the class and kind of workshopping, right? And I was writing horror even back then. I was actually working on my first published novel called Eternal Sunset. Um, and people would laugh at me, and I was writing about werewolves and stuff, and they'd just laugh at me because I'm not writing about having my period. Like I still remember this woman reading this thing about, I think it was a poem, and she had her period, and the Kleenex in the wastebasket was piling up with her tears or some fucking shit, and
Oh my God.
it was just like what, and everyone's like, yeah, that's the best, that's the best. And I read my thing about a werewolf, and I still remember it was just a fly walking on this little kid's foot, and he turns out to be a werewolf later. That scene's cut from the book, but and people are like, well, what's that? What's that? The fly and werewolves, and and I was, and I felt like Rudolph, everybody
Mm.
making fun of me. So it's like, fuck this. I don't want to go on and do creative writing with all these people. Like, they're all assholes, and I'd have to be with them forever. So no. And so I had it in my head, and I even had it before then. Like, if you can write, you can write, and if you can't, you can't. So I put way more focus into the screenwriting, and
Hmm.
I did quite well with that. And I did horror things with that. I was already kind of horror bent, and then in third year, I met my first husband, and he was in the film program as well. So we had a lot of film classes together, would read each other's scripts, and then we both after we graduated, got wonderfully scammed by a producer who stole
Oh.
our work and,
Oh
and used
no.
it. Yeah. So I had something on TV that I wrote, but it was stolen from me, and they paid me like $100 and said they were going to pay me more or whatever, and but they, yeah.
Oh
So I
shit.
got a bit disillusioned with the film business. But I still was like trying to, I wasn't sure if I wanted to write novels or screenplays, but then ultimately the novel writing was the thing that took off. So that's where I had my focus. And plus, it's a lot easier to be a novelist when you have babies around than, because we all know the
Yeah.
film business is a lot of schmoozing, and my
Yeah.
first husband was in the film business. They're never home, right? So you can't be raising kids, and I mean, you can if you want sitters, but I was one of those. Sorry, my phone's dinging. Um, I wanted to be one of those moms that was home with my kids. So the novel writing came at a good time. Plus, editing other people too started around then too. So yeah, so like I said, so I finally had a chance to. The pandemic for a lot of us was a bit of a pause, and it's like, oh, okay, I can think about what I want to do when I grow up. So for me, it's like,
Hmm.
okay, why don't I just, I'm watching all these, there's so much, there's because now we have the internet, a wealth of information and screenwriting webinars, and you can read scripts for free. You used to have to, go down to that Hollywood canteen or whatever to
Yeah.
buy them and read them and stuff. But now you can just download anything you want, the latest script, and see how they're written. And I, get to do all these Zoom things with all these famous directors and writers and stuff. They don't know I'm there because, there's a million of us watching, but the advice, and the pandemic was good for that because these people wouldn't be doing any of that. They'd be out on sets everywhere, but they're like, yeah, well, we're in a pandemic, so I'm just going to sit here and tell you all the secrets, and
Hmm.
so it's been really interesting. I felt like I went back to school again, but even better because I'm dealing with people who are actually out there doing stuff right now,
Hmm.
like Dan Stevens and I'm Your Man and babbling on, and then the woman, Maria Schrader, the woman director who directed him, and they're up for an Academy Award. They just talked the other night about something, and yeah, it's exciting. Well, for
Yeah.
me, maybe
I
not for anyone else, but
I guess some good things have to come out of the pandemic, right? Like it if
yeah,
anything, it made learning stuff from people not in your backyard just so much more accessible because all these big name people have realized how much money there is in webinars and like
yes.
Zoom things.
And then a lot of these people, these producers and directors, talking on at these classes or whatever, they're also saying, the world of Hollywood may have changed forever because now people realize they can do pitches on Zoom from around the world. You don't have to like fly to Hollywood and go into the room. And and the people receiving pitches like it better because you know, they can get on with their day, and you
Hmm.
know, and ultimately, you know, if you pass the pitch thing, then you can start doing the in-person stuff or whatever. But yeah, so I think it's opened up opportunities for so many people around the world that can't get to Toronto or New York or
LA,
Hollywood, where all
yeah.
the big players are, right? You know, people from, you know, Switzerland can pitch to Hollywood. You know, it's really incredible right now. And so you got to, like we said, keep saying, look at the positive parts of what's going on, or we'll go mad and die.
Definitely, definitely. So you mentioned before as well that you were doing like stuff like on-set work, like you were extras on set. What sorts of other jobs have you picked up in addition to your writing? Because I know before you've mentioned a lot of interesting ones.
I've I've had so many jobs in
Yeah.
my life. You know, everything from just like retail work, you know, like working at, I won't name any stores, but you know, just basic retail work. A lot of I've worked at probably like 70 restaurants, you know, it's like a lot of waitressing and bartending. You know, you got to have the, but this is what happened in the pandemic too. So just before the pandemic, I had several jobs. I was an emergency waitress. I was a pet sitter because I really miss having a pet. I don't have one right now. So I had 7 dogs I walked on a regular basis and 3
Sounds like
cats I would
heaven.
go and check on. And so I had 10 pets instead of one, but boom, that's all gone because no one's traveling. And and then I have a job which I haven't been able to do for almost a year because they're not having classes, but I have a job at a college cleaning CPR mannequins,
Oh,
which is like
jeez.
wonderfully creepy because I'm just watching these little baby torsos and putting their little lungs in and taking them out and for the
Ouch.
CPR classes. And that's weird. I've had that job almost 10 years. That's just a couple hours a week, but it's fun. And proctoring, and now I teach creative writing at George Brown College. That just started about a year ago. I was hired just before the pandemic, and it always was an online class, so I do that. But I know what you're getting at is the tarot reading.
I think tarot reading's super cool and interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is. And how I fell into that was when my first husband and I divorced. I was a single mom, and it's like I wanted, you know, as I said, I want to be home with the kids. What kind of job can I do? And I started trying to think outside the box, you know, and this is back in the 90s, right? So we didn't really have a lot of internet yet, and things like tarot were still really underground. There's nothing really on the internet 'cause the internet wasn't the internet yet, and so I'd always been afraid of tarot cards, but there's this little new age shop down the road kind of thing, and they were always had little workshops and classes going on. So I went to this one class, which was a mediumship class. It's taught by James Wells, and actually, I'm Facebook friends with him now. We've been Facebook friends since Facebook was invented. But anyways, so he taught this. It was kind of like a smorgasbord of metaphysical stuff. So every week you'd learn something a little different. And I knew nothing about anything. So there, like one week was palm reading, one week was scrying in a bowl of water, another week you'd sit across from someone trying to read each other's minds, and just all these things. It was like 10 weeks. So one week was tarot cards, and I was terrified. I was going to skip the class because I'd always been afraid of tarot cards. But I thought, what the hell? I'll just go see what this guy has to say about that devil's instrument of death, you know, and and I'm not even religious, and I was terrified of it. And but the way he explained the cards wasn't scary at all. And I felt, oh, this is interesting because I didn't know any, like I said, it was all arcane information. You couldn't even go to the library and find out much about these things back then. Like it really was underground. And I was like, oh, that doesn't seem so bad. So then I saw a sign, you know, it's the whole, you know, the student is ready, the teacher appears. So I saw another
Yeah.
sign a month or so later, tarot classes, and by Viva. And so I went to sign up for that. And so So I signed up for tarot classes with Viva and I studied with her for 3 years. But oh my God, she was the total opposite. Um, type of teacher than James was. She was scary as fuck, man.
Yeah.
She had like the black hair and the black eyes and it's so negative. Like everything, you're gonna die. Every card is you're gonna die. You're gonna freak. Like she was excellent and she could read your mind like crazy. It wasn't like you're gonna die, but if you could die, that would be better than the things she would see coming your way.
Oh my.
And then, at the end of every class, would do like a test reading or whatever, and so you'd be in the hot seat. And I never wanted to do it. I think she did me once in 3 years because everyone who sat in the hot seat and should do their cards, to demonstrate how to read cards, they'd leave the class crying every time,
Oh.
So so then, but yeah, so I did that for about 3 years, and then I made friends with one of the well, several girls in the class, and one of the girls, Julie, we went on to create a company called Two Stupid Witches, and for us, we were terrified of all the things we'd learned, so we try to put a positive spin, like how can we make people not cry? We got to learn more about these cards, so we learned the more positive, uplifting things because we didn't want people crying and scaring them and all that. And yeah, so we actually did that at conventions and stuff too for a few years. And interestingly enough, for some, I guess she is now married to that first husband of mine. But
Oh,
I
small
introduced
world.
them. Yeah, I introduced them. Yeah, they were both divorced at the time, and yeah, so it's like, hey, you guys are both lonely. Go hang out. And they've been married like 15 years now, so anyways, yeah, so that was tarot cards. So I do tarot card readings, at conventions or whatever, and online on Twitch. That's when I first started this channel. I was doing tarot readings. That's all I was doing for the first year or so, and then my computer got crappy, and I didn't do anything for a couple of years here on Twitch. But and now, during the pandemic, I don't really do tarot readings. Like I was on YouTube, I would do them and stuff. And I stopped because, like, if someone calls me personally and wants one, I will do them, but I won't do these random ones because I feel like we're in this pandemic and I know people are looking for hope and answers, and I don't want to give people false hope. I don't want questions about, oh, am I getting COVID or am I going to die? Or, because I don't answer those questions anyways. So I just figure it's just best not to do it. But once the pandemic's over, I'll probably do tarot on my channel now and again.
Yeah, and once like cons and stuff are more of a thing again, like people are going to that and they're typically more optimistic and all of
Yeah,
that fun stuff. You go to a con to have fun, right?
exactly.
Awesome. So writing. What subgenre of horror do you like to write the most?
Um, I'm not really sure. And I think this stems back to when I was writing books for leisure books, with my editor, because at the time there was someone in their stable of writers who's a witch writer and someone who's their vampire writer. And then so I asked the editor, what should I be? Have a should I be like the haunted house writer? My first book with them was House of Pain, which is a haunted house book. Should I be the haunted house writer or what? And he actually liked the idea of me playing around with different things. So my first book with them was Haunted House, but House of Pain. Then my second one was The Birds and the Bees, so Killer Birds, Killer Bees. Then Borrowed Flesh was a witch with eternal life, which is the same witch from my first published book called Eternal Sunset. And then the last book I did with them was Mistress of the Dark, which was a serial killer who was a waitress in New York City and had a crush on Johnny Depp. Um, and so I played with different things, and then I've kind of been doing that ever since. I do have a series of books with Riverdale Avenue Books called Witch Upon a Star, and it's witches, and they're sexy witches doing sexy things for every sign of the zodiac. And I think I have 5 or 6 books in the series now. And if people buy them, I will write more. And so I have that whole witch thing happening. Then the book I've been working on the last year was like the working title has been Four Witches and a Dude. But I'm not too sure what I'm doing with it, so I may put it aside. I'm about 70,000 words in, but I need to put it aside for a bit. So I'm going to be working on a monster book. And then in my short stories, there's ghosts, there's monsters, there's vampires. I've revisited the Frankenstein theme, I think 4 or 5 times now. So I think if I had any kind of subgenre, I think it's that I keep re-exploring Mary Shelley's ideas about um, the modern Prometheus, or man, who's the monster, manipulating science to get what we want, and things like that. So I would say that's what I do enjoy is asking those questions. But yeah, I think I like not being pegged as that person who writes that thing because it really does open me up to write about anything I want. And I do. I got vampires, I got witches, I got werewolves, I got ghosts, I got you name it.
Hmm.
I've written about friggin' dinosaurs on the loose, everything. I love it all. So I'm glad I don't have to pick just one.
Awesome. Eternal Sunset. You said that was your first book. What is that one about? You said it was about witches?
Yeah, so that book was my first like actual published novel, though I'd written a few before, like any other writer does. The idea at the time, we're talking 100 years ago now. She's a witch who went to university, and because I was in university at the time when I wrote it, and she's just trying to find herself, and she stumbles upon an ancient spell book and discovers the spell for eternal life, and the whole book is her quest to get eternal life and all the horrible things she has to do, like get a werewolf's tongue, get a mermaid's hand, all the things you do in a fantasy to gather the ingredients to make the spell. Then she does make the spell. And then it was supposed to be a trilogy: Eternal Sunset, Eternal Darkness, Eternal Nightmare. There's going to be a million eternal books. She has eternal life. We can write about it forever.
Yep.
But then the publisher that did that first book, they crashed and burned. And even though to this day I have notes and stuff for those other books, I've never gone through with it. But like I said, Borrowed Flesh has some of the same characters from that first book.
Hmm.
And Borrowed Flesh is Vanessa, who was 20 in Eternal Sunset. Now in Borrowed Flesh, she's 40. And she's dealing with being middle-aged, even though she has eternal life. So spoiler, yeah. But what is middle age when you're, have eternal life?
At that point, age really is just a number.
Yep, it is.
That's really cool. So you've got several or not self-published, traditionally published books under your belt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you self-published any books as well, or?
Yeah, I would say like the leisure books, the ones I just mentioned, they've been republished because Leisure went out of business, which is why I haven't written more books for them. And so they went out of business, and so a publisher called Crossroads Press has published those. But then I did 3 books for Sam Hain Horror, and that publisher crashed and burned just when I was going to write some more. So I did 3 books with them, which was Captured Souls in Flesh Failure, and those are 2 Frankenstein-inspired books, and then one called A Penny Saved. And so that was where I decided to have the experimentation of self-publishing. So I figured those books have already been published and vetted and edited and all that. So I would self-publish those and see how it goes. And then I've self-published a couple of stories that were previously published. I think I've only published one story, which is Gilda and the Prince, which has no one ever saw till I published it, but everything else had already been vetted or published.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure I'm a true self-publisher because I didn't start from scratch as a self-publisher, and I don't really do all the things a lot of the self-publishing people do. Um, but one thing I thought was cool about my story Gilda in The Prince is that movie I saw the other night, I Am Your Man, with Dan Stevens. You know Dan Stevens, the hottie from Legion, and he
Hmm.
was the Beast in Beauty and the Beast and all that.
Yeah, I remember.
He's
It's one of my
yeah.
favorite movies.
And so I even though my Gilda and the Prince story is only like really short, it's like 20 pages or whatever, um, it touches on kind of the same themes about, you get your sex robot companion and now what, what happens, and what's the robot thinking? Are they alive? Are they dead? Are they going to turn on you? It's all that stuff, right? Since I'm a horror writer, my story's a little darker than
Hmm.
the I Am Your Man romantic comedy version, but it was dark too, though. You know, the whole, and again, that comes back to Frankenstein themes, I think, when we're creating creatures to do, what we think they should be doing for us, which
Yeah,
is what Frankenstein was doing for his creature, right?
but they don't want to do the thing. They are
Yep,
like children. They have their own independent spirits.
exactly.
We've actually got a chat question, which is a very good question.
Ooh, excellent.
Scribecat asks, do you regain the rights of your books if a publisher goes under?
That's very, very good. There's different answers to that. So I'll tell you what happened with these publishers. So with Leisure, um, I could tell that things were bad
Oh.
with them. And so, and I had an agent at the time too. And I asked my agent, should I get my rights back? It looks like Leisure is kind of like going, they're drowning. And she's like,
Hmm.
oh no, just wait, hang on, see what happens. I'm like, no. So I wrote and got my rights back. But and then about a year later, they closed the doors for good. So people who didn't preemptively get their rights back like I did, they had to go through hell and high water
Oh no.
to get their rights back because now the company was in receivership for bankruptcy, and then there's all this other mess. And it took years for some of these people to get their rights back because it was just a mess. And then with Sam Hain, it was a not quite as complicated because Sam Hain was a different sort of publisher. And so but again, I saw the writing on the wall, but they had a sense they were going under, and they asked some of us if we'd like our rights back early before the shit hit the fan. So again, I lucked out and got my rights back before other people who were hoping to see what happened, and then they were in all that hell again. But if you're trying to get your rights back when a publisher is not out of business, they'll stick pretty close to the contract that you signed with your own hand.
Hmm.
So there may be things like, they retain the rights for 7 years, or they retain the rights if they go bankrupt, then it goes here and there. Yeah, so read that right fine print because there are things that happen if people go bankrupt. You got to protect your own ass. And so if you see the writing literally on the wall that something's going down, especially a small press, and I'm not even talking small press. Leisure and Sam Hain were big presses. Like Sam
Hmm.
Hain wasn't that big, but Leisure, like that was New York City. Like I've been to that building. It was huge, It was,
Hmm.
it's mostly the romance, just like with Sam Hain, that kept everything floating, and horror was kind of like a side genre for both companies. But yeah, you got to stay on top of everything. You got to watch the news. You got to see what's happening. And yeah, if something's happening, try and get your rights back as soon as you can before things get caught up. But you will. There are things in the contract about such things too.
Hmm. So it's definitely something you want to pay attention to if you're thinking of going the traditional route.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds. I feel really bad for the people who weren't able to get their rights back before things got crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
Probably had to jump through so many hoops.
Oh
Um,
yeah, and now it probably wouldn't be, because don't forget this was just before Twitter and all that got really huge. So I'm curious, like what would have happened if we had Twitter and social media and all that while that was all going down. I'm sure it would have unrolled a little differently.
Yeah, I wonder if there'd be pressure from the readers for the publisher to make sure they had their writers covered. I don't
Oh
know.
yeah, there would be all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah,
You, you see all these things on
yeah,
and
because
people get all up in an uproar.
yeah, like if people like any given series, like whether it's on TV or it's books, like they'll raise hell and high water to defend it. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah, they will.
Wow. So how many books have you published altogether? And I know this is like picking like your favorite child, but which one was your favorite?
I haven't sat and counted because um I've done a couple books under pen names and some books that like the leisure books, they've been published twice, so I'd say over 20 traditionally published books. One of my very first books published can I talk? One of the very first books published was House Magic: The Good Witch's Guide to Bringing in Grace to Your Space. Because back then, like I was mentioned earlier, you couldn't find a lot of this metaphysical information. Well, now you can just Google, and be like, well, we don't need this book, and it's all on Google. But it wasn't when I wrote the book.
Hmm.
There was nothing like that. And then, so yeah, so I've done a couple of nonfiction books too. But the House Magic book was done under my tarot name, Ariana. And I used to read only under Ariana for years. And then it's too hard being two or three people, right? So my favorite book, I don't know, I'm probably one of those people, it's like the one I'm working on now. But I do have to say that Eternal Sunset still has a place in my heart because it did take like I spent about 10 or 15 years writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting that book, and it was my first published book.
Hmm.
Um, so I still like that, even though it was published by a small press. That went under. And actually, you can get a copy of it because Crossroads picked it up. The same people who picked up my leisure books, they picked up Eternal Sunset as well. But I have to say, I haven't read Eternal Sunset in about 20 years, and I can bet you $1 million that it has not aged well.
Yeah, a lot of things that were written like,
In the
uh,
90s, the 80s.
yeah.
Well, it was started in the 80s and was
Hmm.
finally published. Yeah, 'cause I went to university. I started working on it in 82 and it was finally published in 99, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah. So you think back to those 80s movies that are not quite, I love comedy and stuff. And so I write all kinds of things that are,
Yeah, I find comedies definitely don't age particularly well in
yeah,
some
and this
cases,
has some of
unfortunately.
that. Yeah. And I'm kind of mean to people. Well, I am a horror writer, but.
It comes with the job description.
Oh, hi, Long Tour. How are you? I see someone saying hi to me in my chat.
Well, hello, everybody. Yes, we've got some chatter going on my end as well. All good things, all good things.
Yay, great, great.
So regarding traditional publishing, since that's what you are the most familiar with, what advice would you give to new writers who are trying to get their first book published?
I would say, um, for the technical side of things, uh, write the best book you can, write as many drafts as possible to make your book as polished as possible. You don't have to hire an editor. Some people do hire editors before they send to traditional publisher. And even though that's what I'll edit their books, but I'll tell them like if your book gets published, they have people that do this. You don't have to pay me, but some people want the confidence of having an editor to edit their stuff. But I think, in my honest opinion, is if you're going to submit your work to a traditional publisher, don't hire an editor to do it because that's not you. That you'll hand in this edited book, and the people will think, that you write like that, and you don't because you had an editor do that. And then
Hmm.
as your career goes on, you may find it tricky to keep submitting that type of work. But that's just kind of an aside technical thing. But the best advice is read the guidelines. Like I know everyone says it, read the guidelines. Every publisher is different with how they want things, when they want things, how they, double space, triple space, whatever, hand crayons, whatever. Every house has the way they want things. Some houses will take cold manuscripts. Some houses only want agents. Some houses, like Angry Robot, they only take agented work, but every year or two, they will open up a window for a month where you can submit an unagented can I talk? An agented book to them and they will look at it. So there are opportunities even if you don't have an agent. And then I would also say as a not the technical side of things, but the how do I get published side of things, once the world opens up again, get your ass to conventions, interact with people, get to know the editors and agents. If there are pitch sessions, hey, I got to get a sip of water here.
Good call. Good call. I should get water instead of coffee.
Well, actually, it's kind of like juice. But anyways, juice, whatever. Um, so like in May, um, yeah, as you know, I'm a member of the Horror Writers Association. So
Mm-hmm.
in May, there is a convention called StokerCon, and this year, and it's put on in different parts of at this point North America. Oh no, they were trying to be in England, but then the pandemic hit. So around the world, they
Mm.
move around the world like World Horror used to, but now World Horror doesn't exist. So now we have StokerCon, which is the Horror Writers Association convention, but you do not have to be a member of Horror Writers Association to attend. And this is if you want to be published in horror or even movies and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you need to go to this convention. So this year it's in Denver, Colorado, and it'll be in May. And so they'll have pitch sessions. They have Horror University. We can go and learn things. But the most important thing is the pitch sessions. So, like pitch sessions, you sign up for in advance, not when you get there, but before. So, read your emails and you can sign up to pitch to agents or editors and publishers. And they'll usually give you one or two slots. You can't pitch to everyone because there's too many people that want to pitch. That's your best opportunity. Second best opportunity is going to the parties, going to the panels, and don't be a pain in the ass.
Oh.
Don't be following people to the bathroom. Never, ever, ever, and we don't have to worry about this as much anymore with electronics,
Mm-hmm.
give your manuscript to anyone at a convention. Like the agent does not want to carry your goddamn 400-page manuscript
Oh
on the
no.
plane in her suitcase, along with 20 other people's manuscripts and all the free books. And no, you don't do it. If they want to see your manuscript, they will ask for it. The main thing you do at conventions is networking. You're just getting to know people. You're laughing at their jokes. You're just being a human. You don't even talk about your work. You're just hanging out. And and then they say, "Oh, are you a writer? Are you working on?" And then, "Oh yeah, I'm a writer. I do some stuff, and I'm doing a haunted house book." Or, "Oh, cool, cool, cool." And
Mm-hmm.
then they may say, "Oh, well, why don't you shoot me an email when we get back home or whatever?" So if someone ever says that to you, you shoot them that email. But you
Mm-hmm.
also say, "Hey, man, it was great to see you at that room party on Friday night." Let's try and remind them where you guys connected, because they probably said that to a lot of people. And then send them your very, very best work. And also, if you're querying um, editors, again, it has to do with reading the guidelines, but most people just want a letter first. They don't want you to send the whole manuscript or even 10 pages. They just send a, "Hey, I've got a book," and then send them a log line or a one sentence description of your book, and then a little paragraph, a little more detailed paragraph about your book. It's the same in screenwriting and novel writing, really,
Mm-hmm.
just to pique their interest a bit. And you may or may not want to include some characters, but I wouldn't send a proposal or anything until they even answer you and say, "Oh, we don't have any openings," or "We have openings." So that's a way to sidestep the slush pile It's a different sort of slush pile, but it's a little smaller. It's probably only this big instead of this
Yeah.
big. Right?
And
It's
it's
still real
easier for
small.
them to wade through this because they've got a lot less content to read.
Yeah, and as we know, people are more apt to work with people they've met in real life or know in real life or had a passing glance at, which is why you always want to be on your best behavior at a convention. You don't want to be that asshole that gets booted out and and then
Yeah.
maybe you may or may not. I know a lot of editors and agents don't even pay attention to that stuff. They're too busy for the gossip. But, but you never know. You never know who's watching or anything. Actually, I'll tell
Hmm.
you, since I'm prattling on, um,
No, by all means.
how how I got published was exactly that.
Hmm.
Um, I believe it was Denver, in fact, the World Horror. So I really wanted to write for leisure books when I grew up. That was the thing I really, really wanted more than anything. I'd spent like 10 years reading all the horror books, and then I'd write all these, ideas and proposals, and so then a new editor came, and it was Don Doria. That's how long I've been in this game. I was there when Don Doria first was hired at Leisure. And so I'd sent him a couple of proposals. I think I'd sent four over a couple of years. And he was notoriously leisurely getting back to people because there was no internet or email. It was snail mail. And so I laugh
Oh,
when I see people going, I had to wait 2 months for an answer. It's like, no, we waited 2 years for a fucking answer, like
oh,
in the old
wow.
school days. Oh, yeah, you'd wait years to hear from Don. But, anyways, I never seemed to have to wait quite as long as some of my friends. So after my fourth proposal, I'm like, oh, I'm never good. He doesn't like my stuff. And so I went to a world horror. I'd been to a few, and I had a reading. And I had reading from a short story that had been published. And at my reading, there were only two people in the room. And, um, but I just read like there was 100 people because I've always heard, that like Roger Daltrey of The Who and people like that, always perform as if it's to the whole arena, not
Hmm.
just, So I did. I performed as if I was performing to hundreds of people who wanted to hear my smutty little story. And then so after it was over, the two people came up to me and the one stuck out his hand and shook it and he said, "Hi, I'm Don Doria." And I'm like, I nearly shit my pants because we didn't have internet. We didn't know what anyone looked like back then.
Yep.
And I was like, oh my God, I'm glad I didn't know before I did my reading that it was Don Doria. And it turned out to be Chris Abbey, who's also a horror writer, was hanging out there. And he's like, why haven't you sent me any proposals lately? And I'm like, I gave up. I figured you don't like my work. And he said, "No, I love your writing. I told you that before. It's just you're not pitching the right kind of work. Yeah, you're pitching more fantasy, and leisure is straight horror. You got to get right into that horror thing." And he's explaining, and I'm like,
Hmm.
ah. So then I went home and I pitched him a couple more ideas, and then the one that stuck was House of Pain, and he ran with that, and the rest is history. And then he was my editor again at Sam Hain, and I'm hoping to work with him again at Flame Tree one day too, if I ever write anything that he likes. But I haven't really tried to pitch into him since he's been at Flame Tree, but because
Hmm.
I've been on the screenwriting path, right? So yeah, so the point of the story is you don't know who the hell any who you're going to meet. Always perform like you're performing for the world because you never know if
Yeah.
that's your new boss.
Yeah, for sure. And also, like, just because your first pitches or your first ideas that you send in get shot down doesn't mean necessarily that you're not a good writer. You just
Exactly.
might not be pitching exactly what they're looking for.
Yep. And it could be the sense like in my case, I was doing blended genres. They didn't
Hmm.
want that. They wanted straight horror. Um, they may have just bought 15 vampire books, so they can't buy your vampire book. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I did actually write to Dawn last year, and I did send him a little pitch of an idea for a story, and he said, "Oh my God, I'm publishing a book like that right now." And he sent me the jacket copy of the book he was just putting out, and it was the same story.
Oh no.
It was like I stole it word for word, only it was opposite sexes. And I'm like, how? How is that possible? What was I in your brain and you already read? I got to get back in the brain and write the future, you know? But yeah, well, that
Apparently.
was scary. So at least I was
Yeah.
on the right track because he was publishing that book. It just wasn't by me. You know?
You were on the same wavelength as that author, but they wrote it
Yeah,
down first.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome when you can actually get that sort of feedback. I've actually had that as well, where I had submitted a short story to a podcast and they came back and, like, like normally you get like, oh, sorry, we didn't select it. It's just the copy paste template. When you get like an actual personalized letter back that they liked your stuff because they
Mhm.
wrote back basically the same thing that you got, right? There's like, it's kind of a fantasy horror thing and we want more straight horror.
Yeah,
So I was
yeah,
just like, oh, okay, good. They like me. This just isn't what they need. So that's
yeah,
a
yeah.
confidence booster.
It is, it is. And it happens so often. And this is what I try to explain to people, at talks like this or when I'm teaching or whatever. It, it is so much of the time it's not subjective or an indication of your own talent. It's just they only have 10 slots and they're filled with this, and the open slot needs to be a Loch Ness monster, but you're bringing in the bat or whatever. Like
Hmm.
it's just yeah, it's just a crapshoot sometimes. So don't get discouraged. It's usually 9 times out of 10, unless you're a really shitty writer, 9 times out of 10, it isn't what they're looking for at the time that you're pitching it or sending it.
Womp womp. One day stars will align.
Yep.
Cool. So you mentioned the Horror Writers Association, which I've also gone to some meetings here in Ontario. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that organization?
Yeah, so the Horror Writers Association has been around since I think 1985 or so, and it used to be called Howl, and I forget what it stood for, HOWL. It meant something. Then it was changed to the Horror Writers of America, and that's what it was called when I joined. And I did a lot of squawking back then, which was probably by letter writing because we didn't have internet yet. And but we first were connecting on this platform called Genie. I don't know if you are old enough to know about Genie,
Not
but it's kind of like a
familiar.
DOS matrix phone dial-up Atari. I don't know. It's just like old. It's so
Mhm.
hard to explain to people who weren't alive yet. And so would kind of connect a little bit on there. So I would complain that, we got people around the world. Why is this the Horror Writers of America? It should be something else. So eventually, a couple of us Canadians got together, and so now it's Horror Writers Association. And I always like to tell that story because some people still call it to this day, and it's been Horror Writers Association for like, oh my God, like 25 years. But some people still call it Horror Writers of America, and it really pisses me off because we fought so hard to change it.
Mhm.
Anyways, so this is a group, and it keeps growing and growing. I'm not sure how many members we have now, maybe 1,200 or 1,700. I don't even know. I didn't look it up recently. And so it's writers, editors, publishers, and now filmmakers around the world become members of this association. So you get newsletter, there's website, and I was one of the first people to build a chapter because there was this book fair I always like to go to called Word on the Street, and I always thought there should be a horror writer's presence at this thing. And so one day I'm just like, why don't we have a booth? And so I wrote to the Horror Writers Association to see if we could buy a booth. And that's kind of what started the chapter was I wanted to do these booths once a year. And then I started thinking maybe Fan Expo would be a good place for us to have a booth. And anyway, so then this little group of people would pull together. We became a chapter, and then so we have monthly meetings for year. Like I was chapter head for like over 25 years. And almost monthly meetings almost that whole time in various scenarios. So with the little chapters, that's kind of like, well, I was the Ontario chapter, the Canadian chapter, whatever. We're really widespread, so it's hard for us to all get together. But for something like Fan Expo, when people would be in from out of town to go see the celebrities, we could have a little party at a bar to all meet each other. So the idea with the Horror Writers Association is to connect people who love horror and can help each other write and publish it. And it was mostly focused for traditionally published authors when it was first formed. But now we accept self-published people, and now we have a film festival, the 13, I think it's now called it. They keep changing the name of it. So at StokerCon, we can watch all the movies, and then they're judged and stuff, and they win awards, screenwriting awards and stuff like that. And then, of course, with the Horror Writers Association, we have the Stokers, which is the annual awards for, it's not the best, it's like superior achievement in a category.
They got to be
And
different, I guess.
yeah, and I've always, well, have my opinions on the awards. Anyways, so there's awards.
Hmm.
And yeah, then there's also awards for like being a good volunteer and all that stuff. So once a year, back when we had World Horror, that sometimes hold it in conjunction with World Horror, and sometimes they just have it in New York City. And I loved that, going to New York City, and you just go for a couple days and stay at a fancy hotel. And so you'd have the awards banquet and do a bit of schmoozing and that sort of thing. And if you're in New York City, for me, like my agent and Dawn and were in New York, so I could go see their houses or their offices or whatever. And let me tell you, I went to Dawn's office twice, and I know this will never happen in modern times now, but
Hmm.
he literally had, just like you see in the movies, floor to ceiling manuscripts.
Oh,
Like his
wow.
whole office was like, if they ever fell over, he would have been killed.
Oh, no.
Floor to ceiling manuscripts, and you just look and go, "How did I get through that slush pile?" And
Oh,
it's
my God.
overwhelming when you realize how you made it through towering stacks of manuscripts, and you realize why it takes years to get back. And then of course, since I'd been in the business so long, the couple of times I went, actually one time I brought one of my sons with me, um it'd be like I know every single name on those manuscripts. It's like, oh my god, there's so and so, there's so and so, and it'd be like, I'm not gonna tell them I saw their things in the slush pile. Yep, it's in
Yeah,
Don's office. I saw it like right on the bottom of that 1,000 page.
it's like an episode of Hoarders where you're just like, oh my
Oh yeah,
God.
it's like Hoarders, only it's an editor's office in New York City.
Oh, wow.
Just like in the movies.
I,
I'm sure it's not like that now, but
yeah, I'm sure it's all like digital
it's
now
all,
for the most part.
you've got a
So,
disc.
yeah, he's just got like a portable hard drive somewhere that just has like hundreds of files of
Yeah,
manuscripts in it somewhere,
I'm sure.
which I'm not sure if that makes me feel better or worse.
I know, because at least like the walking into a room of manuscripts, it's kind of like, yeah, I better get on this. I don't know. He was great at what he does. He's still great at what he does, but yeah, I just can't imagine the intimidation. It's like, oh shit, now I got to go through all. Well, of course he has assistants and so on, but
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I should hope so. Poor man.
yeah, but yeah, it's like, yeah, well, Don, I haven't heard from Don Doria in 2 years, and I'll say, yeah, well, have you seen his office?
There's a reason. There's a reason. Um,
He's getting there. He's getting there.
all right. So for the Horror Raiders Association, what are the requirements for joining?
Yeah, there's several levels. Um, and I believe it's still, I haven't researched this recently, but I believe you can join as a fan. But there is affiliate level and um Active. So active is what I am, and I've always been active. I've never been below active because I joined as a published author. Because back then I wrote a pile of video boxes for horror movies, for Sam the Record Man or whatever. Back at VHS days, I wrote like 400 of them, and so that qualified me because I got paid $1 a word or whatever it was,
Oh, wow.
and probably the best writing gig I ever had.
Yeah, I was gonna
Anyway,
say, like, I don't usually see writing gigs for $1 a word. Usually it's like
yeah, well,
5 cents.
yeah, no, like I tell you, when I first started being a writer, it was actually a lucrative career. It could have been. And then I don't know what's happened. We're still living in the 30s now with our payments. But yeah, so to be an active member, you have to jump through some sorts of hoops. And I don't know what the current jumping is, but they do now allow self-published authors to become active members as well. That was a big battle for many years, and but you have to have sold so much. Back in the day, way back, I remember that active used to be qualified by having an advance of over $3,000 for your book. And if you were paid less than that, you weren't considered active. And I always got more than that for my books. So again, I was fine as an active. But what was funny is because there was leisure books and then there was Kensington books, and they were both the pulp paperback horror things back in the 80s and 90s. And the thing is, there was all these Kensington book horror authors who were pumping out tons of, like, they had book every month kind of thing, like tons and tons, like Rick Howdala and people like that. And they couldn't get active membership because they were only getting $2,000 advance, even though they were earning money in royalties on the other side. So they had to fix that.
Oh, geez. Yeah, that's a little bit
Yeah,
of,
yeah. So it's not like that now. But
yeah.
that was just historical. Like, what? All these best-selling authors aren't even active members. It's funny. So they've kind of fixed all that a bit. So you can be an active member, and so the benefit of being an active member is you get to vote in the awards. So you get to vote for best author, best novel, best short story, and all that stuff. And that's about the only real perk, as far as I understand it, still, of being an active member is you get to vote. I don't think there's any other perks. I think, oh, well, I guess unless you want to be like on the board, maybe you have to be an officer, maybe you have to be an active member. I'm not even sure about that because volunteer work is volunteer work. And I think if you want to volunteer for something, I don't think they're gonna worry too hard about, your status if you're a horror enthusiast. But yeah, so it's pretty easy. Just pay your 65 US and and you go. But there's just different levels. As far as I understand it, I think now you can join as an editor or publisher now too, but I'm not positive. And then when you join, if any of you listening actually want to join, um, as far as I understand it, still, if you want to be involved in a local chapter, and if there is one in your area, you really should take it upon yourself to let the chapter head know you've joined HWA, or you exist. Say, hey,
Hmm.
because chapter heads are just flakes like me. I'm not like scrolling down the list to see who's new, and HWA doesn't tell anyone, so no one's like shutting you out or ignoring you. It's like we just don't know.
Hmm.
Because, it's 1,700 names and you're not going to be scrolling looking for the new guy in your area, right? So if you want to be more involved, then contact your local chapter or even just contact what we call the mothership. And, there's always rooms for volunteers. There's, calls out right now for some more volunteer. They need some more volunteers to do things around the organization.
Yeah. Yeah, I think how I ended up going to some meetings is I turned up at like a fan expo or something and I was just like, "Can I come
And we
to a
wrote
meeting?"
you in. We wrote
Yeah.
you in.
And y'all were just like, "Yes, yes, join us."
Come with us. You can never leave. We're the Hotel California of Canada.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was, and it's great because I've met so many like local Ontario like horror writers that I never would have otherwise gotten a chance to talk to. Like, I guess with
Yeah.
social media maybe, but like it's different when you can meet them in person.
Oh, for sure. And that's why I kept doing it for so long. I only stepped down this past summer just because I'm tired. But I still plan to be involved in all that. I just am tired of doing all the behind the scenes, writing the emails, setting up the meetings, doing writing all that nitpicky stuff. But I just want to go and show up now.
Yeah.
But yeah, you cannot discount the people you meet over the years and the connections you make, and that's what it's all about. We share marketing strategies, or let's have a booth at Fan Expo, let's have a booth at
Mm-hmm.
the library, let's give a talk here or there, and people can set it up. And if you're working as a team, it's so much easier to do publicity things than trying to do it on by yourself all the time. So it's definitely a benefit for whether you get involved in your local chapter or in the organization as a whole. And then when you go to a convention like StokerCon or World Fantasy, or some of the other ones, I just signed up for World Fantasy today actually because it's in New Orleans
Oh,
in
cool.
November. Yeah, that'll be fun. And so sometimes there are, especially back in the day when there was World Horror, there'd be special HWA suites, and you could only get in if you were HWA, and you get a little
Oh.
special ribbon, and so you're in your little cult, and it's fun. It's like, oh, I'm an HW, and then you meet who else is an HWA, and it's all about networking and growing your career and
Mm-hmm.
people helping each other. And I'll tell you, even though horror is scary and weird and sick and twisted and all that shit, horror writers are the kindest, nicest, funniest people you'll ever meet. I have made so many amazing friends through these conventions and through my career. And I never laugh so hard as I do at a horror convention. It's like goddamn stand-up comedy for 24 hours, It's- and I think it's because we get all our
Mm-hmm.
nonsense out in our work, so we can just be people, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Whenever I go to conventions like Fan Expo, always in the horror section, and now they've got like Frightmare at the Falls, which I know HWA has also done. That,
Yep. I was there this year. Yeah.
oh my gosh, I didn't go this
It's the only
year.
time I left the house in 2 years was to go to Niagara Falls.
Uh, I was debating it, but like COVID, and I was like, oh, but I want to go. It was so
I
good the year
know.
that I went.
Yeah, it was a really hard decision, but me and Andrew Robertson decided to chip in for a table together,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we did. So it wasn't an HWA function; we just did it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was cool, but definitely not as many people as it normally would have been. But everyone's just doing the blinking in the sunlight. Oh my God, there's a world besides my apartment. This is the first time almost everyone had been out for like a year. Because here in Ontario, I know about the rest of you guys and the rest of the world, but here in Ontario, we've
Oh
been
my
in
God.
lockdown pretty much for 2 years. And
Yeah.
whew, it's restaurants, whatever. Like in Niagara Falls, I actually went to a restaurant. I was like, I've been to a
God.
restaurant 3 times in 2 years, and twice was in a week. you know,
Yeah.
that week.
Yeah, it was pretty much the same for me. I think in the past 3 years, I can count on one hand the number of times I've been to a restaurant and like, oh my gosh, I miss it. I never thought I'd miss
Yeah,
going to a noisy restaurant, but
I know. Oh, and to get back to HWA for a second,
mhm.
if people are interested in the Ontario chapter, it still continues on. Just because I stepped down, other people have stepped up to run it. Monica Kubler and Julianne Snow, and they now have an active Discord that people can go on. And there's going to be an event this Saturday at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time from 2 to 3. So if you're in the HWA, you don't even have to be in the Ontario chapter. Just pop Monica Kubler. She'll probably kill me, but pop her an email and
Yep.
come to the party.
Monica's gonna get this influx of messages like, what the heck did you do, Seth?
I know, just trying to grow the chapter.
Just getting the good word out, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Got to keep all the horror freaks together.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned before, but like I think you said you had only gone to a couple meetings. There's another writers, what was it? You corrected me on the
Oh, the
name. The
Writers
Writers
Union.
Union of Canada. I almost called it the Writers Guild again, which is why I stopped
Yeah.
myself.
I because you want me to be in it, and I want to be in the Writers Guild too, but you have to sell a
Yeah.
professional screenplay before I can get into the
Okay.
Writers Guild. So that's the difference. It's the screenplay place that I want to be in. So the
Okay.
Writers Union of Canada, I had heard about for years and years, but I had always avoided because I never felt it could do anything for me because I was in HWA, and HWA pretty much filled all my needs except for insurance, health insurance,
Hmm.
right? And they kept going on about, oh, we're going to get health insurance for Canada. Well, they never did. They only do it for the Americans. But so when the pandemic hit and I was losing my mind, like, I don't want to do HWA anymore. So I quit. And then I saw the Writers Union of Canada. If you join that, you can get health insurance. I mean, you have to pay it. It's like $90 a month. But, um, and with that too, during the pandemic, the Writers Union of Canada offered um, and opportunities to do readings. Like the Writers Union of Canada is the liaison to schools and things that, people, authors that go do the school readings and stuff.
Hmm.
Apparently, you can only do them if you're in the Writers Union of Canada, which I didn't really realize because I have done school readings not being affiliated with the Writers Union of Canada. I just go in, hey, I'm going to read. But anyway, so they had this program where they were paying people to read um, on social media during the pandemic. So I did it. I did it twice during on Twitch here. I did it no 3 times. I think I did 3 readings here on Twitch, which were paid for by the Writers Union of Canada. So to me, that was worth the price of admission. Um, and they have a lot of they have it looks like they have webinars. I'm still really new to it and not super engaged, but they have webinars every week on how to build your career or how to publish poetry or how to break into the children's market or how to write a good detective story, or
Hmm.
they cover all the genres as opposed to Horror Writers Association, which is just horror. you
Hmm.
know Writers Union of Canada is everyone. And actually, they also hired me as a developmental editor. There's a place you can go in there, a portal where you can ask, you can get on a list if people need editing work. So they actually threw me something last year. So I actually made a few bucks doing some editing too through the Writers Union of Canada. So, if you're Canadian or like in Canada, it's worth looking at into. It's about they have a thing where you can join for free if you're having financial issues. I believe the usual rate is 100 no $200 a year, but during the pandemic they were letting some of us do it for $100 a year. And so again, I believe when they're probably back to in-person meetings, I don't know how those work because it's of Canada, so I imagine there's some kind of Ontario chapter or something. So
Yeah.
again, it would be total networking opportunities for people.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about. Again, the bottom line is getting your work out there, meeting the right people who are going to help you.
Yeah. And it's another option for anybody in the chats who might not be writing strictly horror.
Exactly, exactly. Because again, you have the networking, they have website, and you get a newsletter all the time, and so much. They have lots of stuff going on, and a Facebook page, and so on. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's all I had for today. So I guess my last question is there any projects or things that you're working on right now that you would like to let people know about? Like it could be
Um,
your Twitch page, because I know you're doing a bunch of stuff on
oh
Twitch.
yeah, yeah. Let's yeah. So a lot of my actual writing projects, I'm kind of working on, and
Yeah.
don't have clear paths for what's going to happen with them. But yeah, so on Twitch, like I mentioned earlier, but I know most of you weren't here earlier because people come in and out on Twitch, so we have to say things multiple times.
Yep.
So here on Twitch, when I first started my channel, I was focusing mostly on tarot reading, but then I don't do that anymore. So I've done several incarnations of trying to do stuff on Twitch if you look back through my stuff. But now my latest, my January 2022 is I'm going to be doing writing streams, writing sprints.
Mm-hmm.
So writing sprints, how I've been envisioning them, but I'm going to tinker with things and see how they go. So that would be how I have it set up right now is I come on a couple of times a week to work on my stuff. And I set a timer for 30 minutes, and then you can write along with me or not. And then at the end of 30 minutes, we do a little stretch. You can ask me questions or tell me what you're working on or whatever. Then we go back and do it again. So they're really just working. So I know a lot of writers, they just like the idea of someone's working while they're working. So that's kind of what that is, because I do have a lot of work to do right now. So I might as well turn on the camera and do it. And if people want to ask me questions, that's great. And then I'm also going to be doing more gaming. And once the pandemic's winding down, I'll do tarot readings now and again, but it won't be
Hmm.
like every day or even every week. But it'll be a special event now and again once the pandemic's over. But I know the pandemic will never actually be truly over. But I mean, when we're not locked down and you
When
know,
we're not all sequestered in our
yeah,
houses.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, so I am planning to be much more active on my Twitch page and doing gaming because I have all these games, so I'm gonna learn them all and
Yeah.
you can watch me learn and stumble and help me.
Yeah. Now, one of these days, I'll rope you and a bunch of the other HWA people into Dead by Daylight.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
we were talking about that the other day.
Yep,
Want to try and
yep.
get together a group of people to play that. But yeah, no, that's I will put your handle in the chat on my end so people can go follow you. Oop, hold on.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Follow me. Follow, follow, follow.
There we go.
Oh yeah, sometimes I do weird unboxings. I might do more of those. I know like unboxing things, people do that mostly on YouTube because they
Hmm.
can edit it all up. But once in a while, I'll do something like that too. But
Yeah, give a little variety and stuff. And then I
oh, I
will.
will say,
Oh,
oh,
yep,
I was
go
going
ahead.
to say, because I have this book here. At Halloween, I was reading, you're asking if I'm reading things. I was reading from this. I don't know if it's backwards for you. Tales of Mystery and Imagination, Edgar Allan Poe. I'm a huge Edgar Allan Poe fan. So I was actually reading Edgar Allan Poe live here on my channel um, during Halloween this year. That was fun. That wasn't part of the writers union stuff, but oh, and I'm going to sign up for. They just sent out an email um, yesterday for more live readings. So if I get approved again, I'll do some more live readings through the writers union, and it'll be horror.
Ooh, awesome.
Hopefully, something new I'm working on. Who knows?
Yay, that'll be exciting.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me on my stream tonight, taking the time to come on and chat with me.
Oh, thank you so much. I know I just talk endlessly, blah blah blah. With you.
Yeah, you
But thank you. It's fun.
you got a lot of experiences you can talk about because very interesting to hear about traditional publishing. I haven't had anybody on yet that has gone that route, so it's
Oh, I have
very
some horror stories about traditional publishing, but that'll be another day.
awesome. All right. Well, thank you everybody who joined in chat. I'm going to quickly see if there's anybody online my to raid. Oh, look,
Oh.
Sephra's online.
Raid myself.
Woo! Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. I have to get better at the rating business too.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll raid if
I,
there's somebody I kind of know, but nobody's on at the moment, so it's okay.
not rating.
No, not right now. So I'll just plug that I will be playing Soma again on Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's like a sci-fi horror game that I just started just this past Tuesday that I'm having a lot of fun with. So I
All
will,
right.
yeah, I will see y'all on Tuesday. Bye.
Thank you so much.